So today I've brought on Elana Natker onto the show. She's a U.S. and UK-based nationally recognized food and nutrition expert and spokesperson who has more than 2 decades of communications experience. She works with GOED, the global organization for EPA and DHA Omega-3s, where she began there in 2015 and manages the organization's consumer and health professional education and outreach. I thought she was the perfect person to come on the show to talk about omega-3s. We talk about a lot of different things. We talk about the common misconceptions around omega-3s and kids' health, the key benefits of omega-3s. We talk about specific conditions like ADHD, depression, children who carry extra body fat, sleep disorders. And we talk about foods that are rich in omega-3s for children, as well as recommended dosages of EPA and DHA in supplement form. And we go through the different types of supplements in terms of their forms and some considerations that you might want to have in mind should you decide to use omega-3 supplements for your children. So before we get going with this conversation, I just want to remind you that there are tons of resources on the nourishedchild.com for you. A bunch of free articles about nutrition and feeding kids. I have paid resources like guides and workshops and classes. Okay, without further ado, let's talk with Elana Natker about omega-3 fats in children. Here we go. Elana, welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill. It's nice to see you.
Well, I know that my audience will be very interested in the conversation we're having today about omega-3s and their role in children's diets and lives and health. But before we get started, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you journeyed as a dietitian into this area of nutrition?
Certainly. So I have a bit of a non-traditional path that I took. So my background is actually in communications. I worked for public relations agencies for years after college. But I wanted to have a specialty and have always been interested in food and nutrition. So I went back to school to get my master's degree, to do the dietetic internship, and then, to become a registered dietitian. And I didn't ever want to leave the communications field, so I was never clinically oriented. I really wanted to, ultimately my dream was really to have my own column in a magazine as like the dietitian expert, but that didn't quite pan out. But working for food companies, organizations, commodity boards, as the dietitian expert who could take the science and find ways to clearly communicate it both to other health professionals as well as directly to the consumer, which is the one who needs this information most of all. That's really been my focal point, and that's what I've been able to do, especially merging these 2 degrees. So that's what I've been doing ever since I became a dietitian and have been in this career.
And so you are, now in your career, your daily work is more focused on omega-3s, and you work with an organization named GOED.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, just so we know your source of information and expertise around omega-3s.
Absolutely. So GOED, which is actually an acronym that stands for Global Organization for EPA and DHA Omega-3. They are a trade organization. They're not a company, or they don't sell any products or anything like that, but their members of the organization are companies all along the EPA and DHA Omega-3 supply chain, all the way from the fisheries all the way to supplement products and everything in between. So I've been working with GOED for many years. In fact, it's been almost 10 years now. that I've worked with them in some capacity, either as a consultant or now in my role with them as a director of consumer and health professional communications. And so what we do, what my role anyway with GOED is just what I was describing, which is to work with our PhD scientists and to take the science of omega-3s and communicate them into ways where consumers can find actionable ways to get these important nutrients into their diet. Because I know we're going to talk about children, but everybody, adults and children alike, are just not getting enough of EPA and DHA omega-3s. And it's a complicated topic to talk about because, again, it's these long acronyms, EPA, DHA, ALA, what do these all mean? So trying to find ways to make it very simple and actionable and easy for especially busy parents to know what to do with their children.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into my first question for you, which is, what are omega-3 fats?
Sure. So fats are essential parts of our diet. There's fat, carbohydrate, protein, and omega-3 fats are a type of fat, and they are highly unsaturated fat, meaning they tend to be just better for your heart. Saturated fats are the ones that are like solid at room temperature, like butter and lard, not very good for your heart. Unsaturated fat, much, much better. And EPA and DHA are omega-3 fats that are abundantly studied and have been known to be really good, not only for your heart health, and there's a lot of data on that, but also for your brain, because DHA is concentrated in the brain and in the retina of the eyes. So it's also good for eye health. And there's loads of research that also show how important it is during pregnancy, not only for the viability of the pregnancy, but also for so not only for the viability of the pregnancy, but also to have the proper development of the fetus during pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So omega-3 fats, we're specifically in this conversation focusing on this specific type of fat and the role it plays in brain health, cardiovascular health. I mean, there's so much research out there. We'll get into that, I think, as we move through some of this conversation. But just for the listeners, we are focusing on DHA and EPA, which are two types of omega-3 fats.
That's right.
What are some of the misconceptions you see or hear out there in the public from the consumer about omega-3s and health overall, but then specifically to children's health?
So another thing that I didn't specify when talking just about the omega-3 fats is, so I kind of glossed over it. There's actually three kinds of omega-3 fat.
Mm-hmm.
There's EPA and DHA, which we're going to talk about quite a bit here, and that's where lots of the research is on the omega-3s. And there's also ALA omega-3s. And ALA is found primarily in plant-based foods like chia and nuts and seeds. And they're just scientifically, they're shorter chain omega-3s. EPA and DHA are longer. And it's the EPA and DHA, which tend to come from marine-based sources like fatty fish or marine microalgae. And so those are the ones that are most associated with the heart, brain, eye, and prenatal health.
Mm-hmm.
And we have scores of studies that have been done on EPA and DHA omega-3. So the misconceptions are that all omega-3s are the same, and that is not true. It is not true. We're getting plenty of ALA omega-3s in our diet. We're not getting enough EPA and DHA. Like I said, it's the science of EPA and DHA that shows their overall health benefit. Much stronger than that of ALA. So we've got to make sure that we're really talking about those marine-based fats.
Mm-hmm.
And with children, I mean, we know that children are just not eating a lot of fish. Adults aren't either. But so we have to find ways to get these nutrients into children as best we can. And they're just, like I said, naturally in food, a little bit hard to come by.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, when you look at the dietary guidelines for Americans and we look at sort of the healthy eating index also and what kids are eating, fish is the one category across all stages of childhood where children are not meeting their requirements. So whether you've got a toddler or you've got a child or a teenager, most kids are not meeting their requirements for fish
That's right.
consumption. Okay, so I love that we're talking about the fact that, all three are essential fatty acids, ALA, EPA, DHA. But when we're talking about what, which essential means we're not making it in our bodies, we have to get it from outside sources. And so when we're talking about this conversation around children, what I know that I talk a lot about is sort of some of the key benefits related to brain development. But for overall, just setting the context of this conversation, what are the key benefits to omega-3, specifically EPA and DHA?
So, I mean, there's been over 50,000 studies that have been done on EPA and DHA, and the vast majority of those are on cardiovascular health. So I know
Mhm.
this isn't directly relevant to children necessarily, but EPA and DHA intake has been known to help prevent heart attack or death from heart attack, or it lowers triglycerides, which, it can be a problem now in children, we've seen, but it's typically more of an adult and even older adults type of problem. In terms of brain health, we tend to associate the EPA and DHA with brain development
Mhm.
and memory and cognition and helping prevent age-related cognitive decline, but also, like I said, during um, infancy, even during pregnancy, and in the first couple of years of life, helping develop the brain. EPA and DHA have a strong role in that. Same with the eyes.
Mhm.
It's the DHA that helps you see under low light conditions, and so getting enough EPA and DHA in your diet help with eye health. And then again, as you get older, um, preventing certain types of diseases of the eye, like dry eye or age-related macular degeneration.
Mhm.
And then, of course, prenatal health. In terms of pregnancy, there's some really strong research that shows that EPA and DHA intake by the pregnant mom helps prevent early preterm births and preterm births, which is really scary, actually, when you have to deliver your baby around like 26 weeks of gestation. And then that just sets the baby up for a lifetime of all kinds of health needs. So if we can keep that baby inside mom as long as possible, you
Mhm.
know, that really is beneficial, not just to the mom and the baby, but associated healthcare costs and things down the line. So those are really the areas of research most studied and most, you know, that have a lot of backing. But, and I know you want to talk about this too, is there's some really emerging areas of research on omega-3s and um, ADHD or
Mhm.
depression or some other kind of, um, still brain related or mind related types of disorders or conditions. And so there is a growing area of study in these parts, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah. In fact, I was just going to talk about, what do you know or can share about, you know, um, EPA and mental health concerns, uh, DHA and EPA for ADHD. I know there's some emerging interest in sleep disorders and omega-3s. What is the science saying to date? And I know it's emerging, but it's always nice to understand sort of what the research is starting to peel back and show us around these conditions, because these are conditions that are specifically of concern for a lot of parents.
Absolutely. So, of course, with the caveat that all of this is, like you said, emerging areas of research. There's robust science elsewhere, and the science is growing, and it's very promising, I will say. So, I'll start with depression. There is quite a bit of research that and there's even so much that there was like a practice statement put out by the nutritional psychology organization, nutritional psychiatry. It's some sort of organization about the nutrition in psychiatry type of practice that does recommend intakes of EPA and DHA as its adjunct or alongside of pharmaceutical therapies for people with major depressive disorders. It shows that it can actually help boost the effectiveness of the medicine and the presence, I guess, of major depressive disorder. So we're talking about the really serious cases that tend to be harder to treat with medicine. So if you can put the two together, have an intake of EPA and DHA plus your medicine, you tend to have better outcomes. So that's some promising areas of research. Also with ADHD, like you mentioned, there's been quite a bit of study that's been showing that kids with EPA and DHA level, that are getting higher intake of fish or, the fatty fish, or getting supplementations with C and DHA, can have more focus, or just performing better in certain focus-related tasks or learning tasks. So again, this is something to certainly keep watch of. And in terms of, for the parents out there, especially parents that have children with ADHD that are just looking to anything, of course, go through your normal treatment first that you do with your healthcare providers. But adding a supplement to your child's diet or adding more fatty fish to your child's diet is a simple, add-on to whatever you might be doing that probably won't, that very well could help. If anything, it certainly won't hurt. Let's put it like that.
Right. Okay. So one of the things that I've noticed about the research with ADHD is that it is oftentimes looking at status of EPA and DHA and finding it low in children with ADHD, and so therefore recommending that perhaps supplementation will help. That's very different from studies that look at addition of EPA and DHA and benefits to cognitive status or attention or focus. What's your sense? Is the research moving towards more outcomes with supplementation versus outcomes when supplementation is done due to deficiency?
That's a little bit harder to answer because there really is no deficiency definition for EPA and DHA. Certainly having low status, we're going to see more of an effect when you have somebody that already has low status of EPA and DHA, and you measure that through a blood sample. Not very hard to measure. And then you give them some sort of supplementation, you'll be able to see a greater effect because, there's just a wider range that we can cover and be able to do our intervention. So, I think that's also, we see this in the pregnancy research as well, the same type of thing where we see most of the effects in the women that have very low status at the beginning and then have better outcomes once they've been supplementing with omega-3s throughout the pregnancy.
So I just want to circle back too, because you said there's no identified deficiency. Can you speak a little more to that?
Yeah, usually a vitamin or mineral deficiency, it'll be, it'll show something like, I can't, scurvy, I'm trying to think, or,
Vitamin
there's,
C and scurvy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or vitamin A deficiency and xerophthalmia, or, blindness, night blindness or whatever.
Right. So we're not going to, you can't really test for deficiency. To the best of my knowledge, there's no, there's no, there's nothing obvious.
Threshold level.
Right. So, and that's why it's also hard to say this is how much you need in order to be sufficient, because we really don't have that measurement to say. But what I can say is that there's a lot of associations and health officials out there that are trying to set certain baseline intake levels anyway, because we do see, especially in the adult population, we do see that at a certain blood level anyway of omega-3s within a person, we can have fewer instances of heart attack or death by heart attack or major cardiovascular events.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're trying to have at least some sort of minimum. And I know that's different with children. And in the US anyway, there isn't any sort of recommendation for omega-3 intake for adults or children. I know GOED, we have some recommendations, but again, it's really more towards healthy adults. But I did look up before this interview of different amounts throughout the world. And there are, basic intakes of like around 250, maybe 300, up to 500 milligrams a day of EPA and DHA for children for various reasons behind them. And so I think that is a good idea for most of the parents in your audience to keep in mind. At GOED, we say 500 milligrams per day minimum for adults. But I think the number can go even higher. I know that here in the US, that the US FDA, they recognize that intakes of 5,000 milligrams is still considered safe, or it's at least considered, no adverse problems. Let's say it like that. So, I personally take 1,000 milligrams myself a day, just to keep my blood levels, at an ideal range. But definitely want to make sure that we understand that there's no, that's why I always say for parents, if they want to give their child an omega-3 supplement, I would go ahead and do that and monitor, of course, with the healthcare provider under their supervision. But, giving them 200 to 500 or even more milligrams per day really can't do any harm. And if anything, may have more of a benefit.
Yeah, I like that. I know that when I was writing Kids Thrive at Every Size, I was looking at the research on omega-3s in children who carry extra body fat. And it was showing that the omega-3 index for those kids was significantly quite lower than what they expected. And recommendations for those children, I've seen around 1,500 milligrams per day, up to 3,000 milligrams per day, with a safety statement, like a paper that came out that was a meta-analysis and really established safety levels of up to 3,000 milligrams for children who carried extra body fat. So, I mean, I definitely recommend it for the patients that I work with who are in larger bodies and who I know aren't eating the recommended amount of fish. And, because it does help. There has been good evidence that shows it does help lower triglycerides in children too.
Absolutely.
So, you mentioned that there's no deficiency level that is recognized. However, are there signs of omega-3 deficiency, like clinical signs?
Not that I'm aware of, no, which is what makes it hard to create a recommended intake necessarily, because we're trying to, instead of looking for something to prevent deficiency, now we're looking for something that will promote health, to have some sort of adequate intake instead.
Yeah. Okay, so it's funny too that, the recommended doses for EPA and DHA, when I co-wrote Fearless Feeding, we put in recommendations and we summarized the major organ. There was a European, I think we had GOED in there, and maybe one other, because the United States didn't have recommendations. So we went internationally to see, what are other countries recommending, and that's what we went with, was 250 to 300, just exactly what you just said. So when do you think parents should be incorporating omega-3s or thinking about, and really thinking about incorporating those? And I know you're going to say from birth on.
You read my mind.
Yeah, but walk us through how a parent should be thinking about this from pregnancy through childhood.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, DHA especially is important during pregnancy for the growth of the baby's brain, of the baby's the eye. And so that's why it's important for mom when she's pregnant to be getting not just the omega-3s that she needs for her own overall health, but also for the health of the baby. Um, so her intake should actually be greater than if she weren't pregnant. While she's breastfeeding, because DHA is passed through breast milk, also important that she is getting all of that extra EPA and DHA into her diet. If she's not breastfeeding, the formula, almost all formula now in the US is fortified with DHA. So and there's a reason behind that, is to help, again, with the baby's brain and eye development. So then once you start weaning a baby off into normal, finger foods, regular foods, certainly unless there's a fish allergy in your family, I would start incorporating fish as a protein as much as you can. And we didn't talk about this, but I think this is a good time to bring up. It's not just any fish that children should be getting for the EPA and DHA. It's really that rich, fatty fish like salmon, to some degree tuna, but like anchovy, sardines. I know that those are a little bit harder to get, or not as popular as salmon, but fish like shrimp or a lot of the flaky white fish, not a good source of omega-3s. So while those are important to get into the diet for, an alternate sort of protein that's not a land-based protein, it's not going to give you the EPA and the DHA that you need. So really focusing on the fatty or oily fish into the diet. So I think, once you start giving your child any sort of dietary supplement, if you feel that they need just a daily vitamin C or a daily something, I would add an EPA and DHA to that as well. Just get them into the habit. Again, likely it's a nutrient they are very much going to need. And like I said, I would get them into the habit of taking an omega-3 supplement. And there's some delicious ones that kids can enjoy if they don't swallow pills. And they're also no sugar. So there's that too.
So let's talk about the supplementation, because I think that's a really confusing area of omega-3s. Because, I work with families, and I almost routinely now suggest an omega-3 supplement, unless it's very clear that the family is getting quite a bit of oily fish in their diet. But when it comes to supplements, here's what I run into with kids. And I know you may not find these same challenges with adults, but kids won't swallow those big capsules. The gummies don't contain enough to be meaningful. There's no way my child's going to take a teaspoon of oil. So help us walk through the different types of omega-3 supplements and which ones might be more amenable to children.
So I would start with children anyway. We have liquids that are easy enough to swallow, to put on a teaspoon or mix it into a yogurt or a drink or something. The downside of liquids is that they can taste like fish. They are like oily, so it's got a different kind of mouthfeel. But again, it's easy enough to swallow. There are some omega-3 supplement types that are like almost like I think they call them swirls or something, that they're it's delicious. It does not taste like fish at all. So that's another option where you can just take a spoonful of that, and it's flavored of like lemon or vanilla or something, and you can just take that. Otherwise, there are these are relatively new to the market. There are these chews that have a consistency of almost like a gummy candy, but not quite. And they, more often than not, are zero sugar. They might have xylitol or something, a sugar substitute. But they're chewy, and they are packed with EPA and DHA omega-3s, much more than like the gummy bear type vitamins, which may have like 30 milligrams to maybe 100. But that's pretty rare to find. But these chews that I'm talking about, they're almost always orange. But they might have flavors like tutti frutti or orange or something like that. But they could have about 500 milligrams I've seen of EPA and DHA. And I know that there's one brand that's actually in the shape of fish. It's really cute. So it's fun for kids. So I would look for something like that. There are also, if none of that is appealing and they must take a pill, they have smaller ones, smaller size that are easier. They also have some that are almost like those, when you go to the frozen yogurt bars, they have those poppers that you can pop in your mouth. It's pills like that. So it'll kind of like you pop it in your mouth and swallow it. But again, it's just finding what will work for your kids and what you can find out in the marketplace where you live.
I oftentimes find myself prescribing that pureed smoothie type textured spoonful.
Yeah.
Kids really like that. And we're not really talking brands, but if you're curious as to what that is, I'm going to have an article come out and I will specify the brands that I tend to recommend. The other one is the chewies, not the gummies, but the chewies, which are a higher dose. And then my older kids will take the pills, but not the horse pills. They'll take the mini pills. And what's interesting about that is I was reading, and you can confirm this or not, that the capsules are limited in terms of how much EPA and DHA can go in just by the size. That's why the capsules are big, to get the bigger dose. Is that what you're finding? And overall, I guess the fish oil liquid is your most potent dose, is what I'm seeing and understanding.
So the size of the pill, yes. I mean, there's a lot going on that we could talk about there, because there's when it comes to supplements, you can get it in triglyceride form or ethyl esters or all of these technical terms, which basically mean how the fatty acid is still connected or not to molecularly, how it's all connected. So for the most part, yes, you're going to have a larger pill because, they might be just larger molecules of fatty acid that are in there, or it could be a higher dose, like you said, that you've got to fit. But some of the concentrates that are really just the fatty acid that are in the pills, those you can get a little bit, they can make them smaller. And it can be that they deliver a lot in that little concentrated dose.
Okay. One of the questions that I think is very confusing, definitely for consumers, but probably for professionals too, is this idea of fish oil versus the individual omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA.
Right.
So when recommendations are given, we're usually saying 1,000 or let's say we're saying for a child, 250 milligrams of fish oil, combined EPA and DHA. This is very confusing for the consumer. Can you sort of break that down for us and kind of put that confusion to bed?
Yes. So, fish oil is the oil, is like the let's call it the food. EPA and DHA are the nutrients within the fish oil. So I should say, just to use an example, I should say you need to have 16 grams of whole grains a day, or whatever. You need to have 16 grams of whole grains. That doesn't mean you need a 16-gram slice of bread, but you need a slice of bread that will give you 16 grams of whole grain, right? It's the same thing with EPA and DHA. So we're going to say you need, let's say, 500 milligrams of EPA and DHA per day. The fish oil, the number that might be on the front of your bottle, is the amount of fish oil. But you need to look at the supplement facts on us, in the label, to see how much of that oil is EPA and DHA, because there's a lot more that's going on in the oil. If you think about even the fish that you eat, a serving of salmon has protein, it has some monounsaturated fats, it has some other fats, but the EPA and the DHA are just components of that. So that's why you really need to look at the supplement facts label, look at the line that says EPA and the line that says DHA, and add them up together to get your amount that you're looking for. Also, don't forget to look at the serving size, because if that amount is talking about 2 pills, but you're only taking 1, then you're shortchanging yourself. So look at the EPA. So people get all concerned because they look at the front of a fish oil pill or something, and it says, well, it says 1,000 milligrams, but you're telling me I'm only getting 800 EPA and DHA from that. And I'm like, well, that's fine, because there's other things in the fish oil itself than EPA and DHA.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And then what about the balance between EPA and DHA?
I worry a little bit less about the actual numbers and more about just the combined together, because in the body, the body will kind of regulate itself about what it needs, whether it's the DHA for this or the EPA for that. So I don't worry about, people talk about the EPA to DHA ratio or something like that. That the science that I've seen has not really borne out of that being a true concern. I do remember what I was going to say before in terms of fish oil being more potent than other forms, and that's largely been debunked. I should just say fish oil is the most common of the supplements. It's the one that we've been creating the longest. It's more abundant to find in nature. But krill oil, for example, is another source of EPA and DHA. Krill is a type of crustacean, it's almost like shrimp. And you'll see that the concentration of EPA and DHA in krill, a krill oil supplement, is less. The type of EPA and DHA, or the way it's in the krill, supposedly it's better absorbed in the body, so less is more, so to speak. You need less to raise your blood levels up. The science is still kind of on the fence about that, but that's at least their rationale. And I know with algae oil supplements, those can also have the amount of EPA and DHA that's comparable to fish oil. So I would look, and algae oil is the only vegan source, vegetarian source of EPA and DHA that you can get. You can't eat algae oil like on the plate. It has to come in a supplement form because it's created from microalgae. We can't even see it really. And so it has to be put into supplement form. But if you're vegetarian or vegan, that's the way to get your EPA and DHA.
Great. I think I was thinking along the lines of some of the information I've seen on mental health and the role of EPA and DHA. They advise EPA being stronger in concentration than the DHA. For ADHD, I've seen, you want the DHA in higher concentration than the EPA. And that's sort of where that question was coming from, sort of the balance. And again, if you're a parent out there listening and you have a child with ADHD or you have a child with mental health and you have a healthcare provider, you can go with this informed approach to your healthcare provider, be it a dietitian or your pediatrician, and just say, what is the best for my child given these considerations that we want to address? When we talk about fish oil supplements and fish in general, some parents are concerned about mercury. And can you address any of those concerns when it comes to fish oil supplements? Are there contaminants in there? What should parents know about that?
So I will tell you, so GOED, the organization that I work with, in order to be a member of GOED, the companies have to adhere to standards of quality and ethics that GOED has set in our voluntary monograph. And they sign this affidavit saying we adhere to these standards, which are as strict, if not stricter, than standards throughout the world. Just in terms of both production of the fish oil and also ethical marketing of the product. And we will do randomized testing of products every year. We do, a bunch of different product testing, and we have yet to find any products that exceed the contaminant levels that have been, set including mercury and some of those other contaminants. So the refining process that takes place to go from fish to supplement is so sensitive. It is able to get those contaminants out and really just distill out the oil that are being delivered in this fish oil supplement. So concerns of mercury, I think, at least according to our testing, is not really a concern at all. It is more of a concern in eating fish. I will say that, because there are fish that are just more, they tend to be higher mercury fish. So they're more of the top feeders, because, the fish going up the food chain will eat the smaller fish and all that. So the top feeders like shark or king mackerel or things like that will have higher mercury, swordfish even. And so I would stay away from those as much as possible, because you do run the risk of more mercury. And especially if you're pregnant, and certainly for children.
Yeah. Good advice. So just to wrap this up, if a parent wants to sort of look into omega-3 status, supplementation, food-oriented approaches, what's the best way they can work with a healthcare provider to address these things? And what are the best resources for them to get more information?
So, the thing about omega-3s and children is, like, right now, there's just not a lot of science in children in general with any nutrients, I would say, and certainly in the omega-3 space. So my first advice to parents is to work with somebody like you, Jill, who is pediatric focused, like really understands the pediatric audience, and has a strong read of the science of omega-3s, or of anything, but certainly of omega-3s. And so start with that. In terms of resources, certainly GOED has resources that are meant for health professionals. So I would advise any health professional to get our e-newsletter or go on our website. We also have resources for consumers, directly for parents or any other consumers. We send out an e-newsletter every 2 months with sometimes tidbits of the latest science, of the latest news, some resources that we have. So I'd recommend people sign up for that as well. It's not easy. I'll be honest. It's not easy to find the latest information on omega-3s. I can't think of any other organization other than GOED that is tracking this for all audiences, and especially finding some things for the pediatric audience would be even more difficult. But, we're here to help, and we have a science database that we can pull from and answer questions if any practitioners have on that too.
Yeah, great. All good. And if people want to get in touch with you, Elana, personally, how can they do that?
Elana, ELANA, at goedomega3.com. Happy to answer any questions at all. And we do have an Ask the Expert, and I'm the expert that they ask in our e-newsletter. So I'm always happy to answer questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise and helping us, all the listeners out there, sort of get their mind wrapped around omega-3s and the importance of those in their children's diet. Appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thank you again for having me on.
That's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this show about omega-3 fats with Elana. I think hopefully what you were able to take away from this is a better understanding of EPA and DHA, their roles in your child's health from pregnancy all the way through adolescence, some of the specific conditions they may be particularly helpful with, and if your child is not consuming 2 servings of fish each week, this is a supplement you should strongly consider. And the good news is there's really only an upside to omega-3 fats. There is not really a downside. So I'm going to leave you with that. In the meantime, give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child, inside and out.